Hello, and welcome to another installment of PSC Next Level Homes Level Up series. I'm Shane Thompson, one of the account managers here in the program. Now, in this week's episode, we're going to be taking a look at our submission process for Energy Credits Plus pathway. To kick it off, we'll officially begin by reviewing the process of submitting an interest form, which allows you to inquire about the program itself. So in doing so, let us transition over to PSC Next Level Homes website. We'll walk you through the initial interest form. All right, now that we've navigated over to pscnextlevelhomes.com, you'll see that this is the landing page that this will take you to. And what we're focused on is this blue button at the top here that says submit an interest form. This is where we go to get the whole process started. So let me go ahead and click that for you. So once you click that button, you'll see that you land on an interest form page, which is a very easy, simple page, which is just here to gather a few pieces of information to get the process started. So you'll see we'll need your contact information, your name, your phone number, email, as well as your role, which is, you'll see here listed as builder, rater, or homeowner. And the last bit of information we'll need will just be a short description of what your project is. So you can talk about, it's a new construction. Are you doing a DADU or an ADU? Are you potentially doing some sort of renovation or addition to your house? If there are any kind of particular components you want us to be aware of, feel free to include them here. I only recommend maybe about a paragraph. You don't have to do a long description, but a couple sentences to a paragraph gives us plenty of information to get the process started. Once you filled all this out and done all the required information, which is just one of those little stars by them, you'll need the name, email, role. You'll click submit, and that'll be sent over to our team, and then we'll use that to do our initial review and schedule our call. And that is it. Very simple 1 or 2 minute process. Now, after you've done the initial submission form, the team will review the inquiry and will follow up with a call to discuss your project as well as any clarifying questions we need to help determine eligibility. Once eligibility has been determined, the next step will be for you to officially move over to our submission workbook, as well as prepare any supporting documentation that you will need. With that, let's move over to our submission workbook and let us walk through it together. As you can see now, we have moved over to our Energy Credits Plus submission workbook. So what we're going to do on this video is we're going to walk through each of the tabs, a little bit about an overview on each tab. We'll walk you through the example, as well as give you some unique and important tips about each of the items, as well as how to correctly fill it out so that when it comes time to submit, you have everything you need ready to go and queued up for a fast and effective submission process. So what we'll do is we're going to start and work our way through all these tabs here at the bottom. As you'll see, there are multiple tabs, starting with the instructions tab, step 1, step 2, step 3, then there's something called the measures tab, and then the export tab. We'll go through each one of these in a little more detail, but let's go back to the beginning and start at the instructions tab. This first instructions tab is just a really high level overview. So let me zoom out just so you can see it a little bit better. Just in the gist of it, you'll see there's not a lot going on here, just a very simple page. I'll zoom back in a little bit. So in this workbook, you'll see it has a quick couple sections here. One is about the purpose of the workbook and the program and the rebate itself. A little bit about eligibility, calling out some important key notes, such as the house has to be in PSC's electric service territory. The house has to be predominantly heated by an electric source, and that the house has to have been completed construction on or after January 1st of 2024, as of today's recording. As you work your way down, I'll give you a really quick overview of instructions for submitting. And then you end up on the incentives table here, which just shows you what the numbers, particularly the dollar amounts associated with additional measures, as well as some of the energy credits. A point to call it here, you'll see that there are 2 incentive tiers. There is a standard incentive tier and a building opportunities incentive. What you want to note is that they are the exact same credit. There's no difference between credit, but this one here applies to projects that fall under the building opportunity incentives, which you'll see is a little asterisk down here. For homes to qualify, those have to be built on native reservations or on income community land trust, or sorry, community restricted land trust there. And we can get more of that in the next tab. I just wanted to call out that there are 2 different tiers. But I will say is that if you do believe your project qualifies for building opportunity incentives and you are building a home or some sort of community on native reservations or on an income restricted community land trust, I would say please pause here and let the team know. And that way we can confirm before you proceed with additional filling this out and needing additional information. We'll probably get on the phone, we'll schedule a call, we'll ask a few more questions to clarify if we haven't already covered it in our initial onboarding call. And that way we'll just make sure we're on the same page. That way you'll fill out the workbook, you'll have a better indication of what your actual incentives are. So that being said, this is just a quick reference here, an overview of some basic eligibility, as well as a high level of instructions. So what we do next, move on to step 1, which is our home details tab. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit here. You can see the whole thing. So we'll see here, once again, not a whole lot here to do. It's just a couple basic home owner information as well as address information, but it's just all these areas in green that we'll be filling out. You'll see there's only about a dozen here, so they're all pretty quick. It should be pretty straightforward for you. Let me zoom in just a little bit. So see, starting from the top, working our way down, we're just asking for some basic information such as the address. In this case, I skipped address 2 because it doesn't apply, but it may be something like a suite number or unit number. City, state, which is the state's obviously already hard coded because this is obviously for Washington only. Zip code. And you'll notice that these are all just boxes I'm clicking, and I just actually typed in the information. With some of the boxes, such as this code permit year, you'll see it actually has an arrow that pops up. It is actually a drop down. In this case, you'll see 2 options here. You'll see 2021 as well as 2018. The WSCCR, which stands for Washington State Energy Code Residential. In this case, you'll see that the 2018 is not eligible because that's a whole separate workbook that we have. So if you are submitting and you find that you are actually have a house that's under 2018 Washington State Residential Energy Code, I'd pause here, let the team know. We'll send you over the correct workbook. It looks quite similar, but make sure it is the right workbook and gives you the right incentive amounts. So as an example here, I'll click the 2021, which is what this workbook is for. We'll skip the reservations and land trust for a second. We'll move on to the subdivision, which I made an example here. I put in my meter number, the builder. If it's not myself, I put who submitted it by. Once again, if not yourself, or whether you're having an official or a builder or your rater submit, but you just put your company name there, the builder name, and then the date the project was completed, and then his utility. Once again, here I'm making a call to electric utility. There's only 2 options in this dropdown, Puget Sound Energy or other. Since this is a Puget Sound Energy offering, the home has to be for PSE. So if you do select other, that means unfortunately your project is ineligible. So you would stop here and you'd let the team know that you are ineligible because of the selection you've had here for electrical utility. Now I want to go back up real quick, going over the travel reservation and income restricted community land trust. For my project, an example here, I selected no, which is usually the most common thing. But if your project does qualify, we've already predetermined that it is, what you want to do is you want to select from no and make them yes. Whether it's both of them or either or, obviously it's usually one or the other. But you'll see that as I'm selecting the yeses and from the no, this is changing here, my incentive tier. Goes from building opportunity. Let me put this one back to a no. And I'll put this one to a no. You'll see that it changes to standard, which is just reflective of the incentive tier, which is corresponds that we saw on the instruction tab for those 2 different columns of incentive tiers. So for most projects, it's probably going to be a no, but if you did happen to select yes for one or the other, so it's good, you just select yes. But for my example, I'll go back and I'll put it back to no, so my incentive tier is correctly updated. And just verify I filled out information out, making sure everything in green has been filled out except for this address line 2. Whoops, sorry about that. So yeah, so this clarifies that I filled it out. So now what we're doing is we're now ready to move over to the next step, which is step 2, energy credits. Let me zoom out here a little bit just so you can see the whole sheet. So a little bit more information here, a little bit more to review. But once again, we're only having to input information that's in these green sections or this greenish bluish section. Perfect. So let me zoom in again and we'll kind of look at each section in a little bit more detail. So start from the top, which is what I recommend. You always want to start in the top, just like reading a book in the top left and work your way down and right. You'll see that I started with the conditioned floor area, which is how big my house is, which either you'll likely know offhand. If not, it'll always be stamped on your blueprint somewhere. And then I moved in here and I selected my primary heating equipment. You'll see that there's 5 options here. And then for HVAC distribution, there's 2 options here as well. So a little more context here, this primary heating equipment option, we'll see that there are 5 types. These types are not something that's unique to PSE. These actually represent and reflective of Washington State's residential energy code. And we have mirrored these from the 2021 code. So if there's additional questions or clarification, you can always go to the code and reference these materials just for understanding where they are and what credits apply, which is typically in energy credits table, which I believe is 406.2 and 406.3. So these match in terms of the type and corresponding verbiage. And what I've done here, I'll select type 2 heat pump, which is a very common installed item for homes here. And then in this example, right, I selected a house that had duct system, so I've selected ducting central, which then takes us here to row 12. So row 12 is calculated here based upon my inputs here and here. If I do a quick example change, let's see that it changes here. Once again, this is hard coded here because this is reflective of what is in the residential energy code, as I said, in those tables 406.2 and 0.3. This is what the code requires. So if you select this option here, 0.2, code gives you this value. So we've just hard coded that value for sake of ease there. Now, as we move down, move into 7 categories, once again, matching and reflecting of Washington State Residential Energy Code for 2021. We've gone and we've selected each of those 7 options, and we've provided the sub options for each one. As you'll see if I click on a couple here that there are multiple options. Some only have a couple, some have a bunch of them. I'm going to click this one here, a bit more here in the renewables, as you'll see. So what you want to do here is to fill these out, you're likely going to go to one of the first few pages of your city stamp blueprints and look for your energy credits table or look for your energy credits reference table that you use to submit for your permit and your building plans. And what we'll see is that these options here, once again, should match exactly what you have in your blueprints because they are reflective of the numbering and the verbiage as used for Washington State Residential Energy Code. So this example here, I'm selecting 1.2. You'll see I've gone through and selected several other options. And some of these, there's only 1 or 2 options. Some of them, there's multiple options in this case. As we scroll down, you'll see I've selected all corresponding options. It's given me a table of credits here, and each one that I've selected, it has provided an applicable value. Once again, the credit numbers here are derived from Washington State Energy Code. You can always reference them in the tables there in code if you want more information, but this is where this is coming from. It's, once again, it's not unique to PSE. We are just matching code here. But as you fill out each item, making sure to follow through and address each one, we'll get a total energy credits number, which then comes onto this table here. It'll summarize the credits you've selected, the credits required per code, what that difference is, which is the number that is eligible for incentives. In this case, 1.5 credits comes out to an eligibility of $645 in incentives on the options I have chosen here. As you scroll down, you'll see there's a little asterisk here. There are a couple items called out for items that count for code, but don't count for our program, particularly items like gas, water heaters, and for example here, solar or renewable energy. That's because those programs either aren't eligible in our program or there's additional programs outside of this one that have corresponding rebates to it. And also noting here quickly that since this program is incentivized towards electric as a primary heat source, some of these items here, such as like the gas and combustion space heating, I also apologize, the gas water heater, are eligible for code. So you do get credit here on the table, but it just won't be an additional credit in terms of getting above and beyond rebates for it. With that being said, I also want to note that you'll see here in the note section, there are other items called out, which are always living here. And these are just references, just so you're aware. For example, you see for number 6, right, renewable pertaining to, for example, solar, even though you get a credit for it, right, and it is a code option that Washington State 2021 Residential Energy Code approves. Just for this program, it's not an eligible credit for additional rebates because there are separate programs that give rebates for this one separately. Similarly, here we'll see some of these credits aren't eligible just because the way they either are configured or are combined together, but they do require some additional consideration because they are either tied to other rebate programs or they're tied to efficiencies and incentives not associated with this program here. Once again, they do apply for code. They are eligible and they do count towards your credits. They just don't count towards credits above code. So you work your way down, you'll see that it's tallied up. It's got my notes. It's giving me a rebate number. And that's because I have everything filled out correctly. What you do want to double check is before you move on that you filled out everything here. And to give you a little reference here, when you open up the workbook, you're likely going to find that it's in this status as essentially nothing has been selected. And it's here in red, just reminding you, hey, please address this item. You haven't clicked anything yet. And that's just to make sure that you don't miss an opportunity for a potential rebate there or incentive. So I clicked it. For me, I didn't install anything, so I selected the no drain water recovery credit. And that's similar for all these options here, right? So once again, they'll come in the status here saying, hey, please address it. Wasn't applicable, so I selected the no credit. So it's important just to notate that even if you didn't install the item that you want to actually select, like you did install it or that it doesn't apply. Last thing I want to address on this tab before we move on is that the way for us to reference and identify these items for eligibility is that they have to be reflective and match what's on your blueprints, particularly on like one of the first few pages on your stamp plans, as I said earlier. Let's say, for example, that you install something above what you have on your stamp plans, right? So let me use option 1 here, for example. Say that your plans have this option 1.2 selected as what you use to meet code. But say after you got your plan set, you decide to go above and beyond, you've added, these improved windows with higher efficiencies, you've improved insulation, which is great. So you install the option that you actually install, but since this isn't on your plan set, we would need to see verification of that, which would come from additional documentation, which likely falls into the category of photos or some sort of invoice that would be reflective of that. So I'd be aware of that as you work these items. If they don't match what's on your plan set, you're going to be required to provide additional documentation. And like I said, usually it's going to be a photo or an invoice, but that can vary based upon the item. And we can definitely discuss that when you get ready to submit. If you have questions, you can always chat about it ahead of time. But just note that if it is something that you did after the city approved the plan set that was above and beyond, note that you will have to provide additional information since we can't cross-reference it to your plans. That being said, let's move on to step 3, which is the additional measures tab. Once again, I'll zoom out here really quick just so you can see it. A quick reference. Once again, not a lot to fill out here. You see it's a pretty small section that we have to fill out. And another tally here at the bottom, which I'll dive into. But let me zoom back in. All right, so see that there are these building elements, which are the additional measures that we provide incentives for. There's a handful of them here. As you see, continuous insulation, wall framing, windows, infiltration, floor insulation, and drain water heat recovery. As you work your way, instead of reading across the page, you'll see that it gives you the element here. It talks about the minimum efficiency requirements, so like what the additional requirement is for you to be eligible for it to count as a credit. And then here, in this section here, it's referring to what was selected or referenced in step 2. Once again, going back to why it's important to fill this out in order, because if you do step 3 and go back to step 2, to come back to step 3 and redo it. But it's referencing what was in step 2. And then this last column here for information is discussing our eligibility. So once again, you have the element, what the requirement is for it to be an improved measure from the base, what you selected for your base, and then if you're eligible or not. Now, it's important to call here that eligibility doesn't mean you get the rebate. It just means that if you did install the measure, you are applicable. Because as we get into some of these not eligible items, you'll see why they are not eligible to be installed above and beyond, because they likely are already matched and exceed the values that you've selected in your first code option. So we'll get a little more detail on that, but just note that eligibility means that you can select the option, but doesn't mean you necessarily get the option, whereas not eligible means there isn't any way to provide rebates to it. So it doesn't matter what you select, because the default will not allow it to calculate additional rebate. So using this, for example, right, continuous insulation, which I'll highlight here, we'll see that I'm eligible, and I selected my option. Once again, there's a drop down for most of these. They'll come to me in a selected view, which is how you usually get the workbook when you first open it. I selected R5 or to R8, and there's my incentive rebate. Noting, just like on step 2, that even though I'm eligible and say I had not selected the option, I would still need to go in and verify that I've reviewed it by selecting no continuous installation. So once again, even though I'm eligible and if I didn't do it, still need to select and identify that I've looked it over. Once again here, moving on to advanced framing, right? So it says to be eligible, I selected standard framing. To get the credit, I need to select 24 inches on center. So I'm eligible based upon what I selected in my previous step, which comes from my blueprint. But in this case, since I stuck with 16 inch on center, that's what I'm going to install. No rebate there. If I did select 24 inches on center, there would be a rebate, once again, because I'm eligible for it. But I did install it, so I'll select the correct one. So that's kind of what we'll see here for Windows. We'll see similar for ACH, selecting your correct options. Well, let me give you a quick review here. For example, let's look at R60 or R70 advanced ceilings. So in this case, right, you'll see that says I'm not eligible. So I selected no advanced ceiling, but say you mistakenly selected this one, or you selected the even higher efficiency, you'll see that it still doesn't calculate the total, and that's because I'm deemed ineligible. So no matter what I select here, it won't change the number. So what I do is I open the workbook, it's coming to me in a selected state. Just to make sure that I've reviewed it and thought about it for a second, I select the no advanced ceiling. I'm working all the way through to make sure I fill these all out. And it gives me a total incentive number, this 765, which you'll see is different than our one we had in step 2, because this is a different calculation. But what you want to do, you want to scroll all the way down the bottom of the page and scroll over. And you'll see that on here on step 3, once again, why it's important to go in order, is going to give us a total incentive based upon our step 2 numbers as well as our step 3 numbers for a total rebate. So let's click back here. You'll see that on this one, we were getting 645, which looks correct. Here we had 765, which is what we see here. So we're seeing that we are getting about $1,400 or just over in this example, which is a pretty good number here. Once again, that's because I made sure I filled it out in order. I've selected all the corresponding options, and now I have an incentive number. So that when I submit, I know that I'm currently eligible for $1,410. And then that's the number I will get. Granted, I can provide documentation for all these elements that I have selected. But just like step 2, I want to note here that most of the items on this section here are generally not going to be in plan sets. So you usually want to expect you're going to have to provide additional documentations. Exception may be, for example, like your wall framing and your windows may be in there. But for the most part, assume that most of these items are going to require additional documentation. As I referenced earlier, you're likely going to need to provide a photo of the item installed. You're going to need to either provide like an invoice or have one of a certified or an expert in the area sign off that it's actually been installed. And for example, in this case, a continuous installation, I could provide a photo of the exterior of the house during construction to show that it was installed, or I could have like a certificate from an installation installer who verify that it was installed. Similar with like my infiltration. Washington State requires a blower door test, so I would have the person who did that test provide me their little sheet with their numbers on it, and I would use that as a reference and submit that as documentation for this area. Once again, just calling out that this won't likely be on your plan set, so when you get ready to submit, be prepared to have documentation or be prepared for the request to come your way to provide information to verify these items. That being said, that puts it on the last step for number 3 of items that we have to fill out. We'll move into the last few tabs here just for a quick reference, which is measure description tab. Let me zoom out real quick here. Now, measure description tab is the exact same elements that are listed here in step 3. See that they correspond to each other. So what we see here on this one, we'll zoom back in a little bit, is nothing needs to be filled out on the measure description tab, because technically step 3 is the last tab for input, but this is just used as a reference to help you understand a little bit better about what these items are in step 3. So you might find yourself toggling the measure description in step 3 back and forth to help work your way through it. With that being said, to get most of the information, you're either going to look on either in the plan set and it's likely not there. You're going to either ask your builder, either your mechanical, electrician, or plumber who install the items, or your framers, as they'll know most of this information. And that's where I would look to gather that information and get confirmation that it wasn't installed if you don't already know it offhand. But the description here just help you a little bit to understand what it is and how we looked at it, if you have any sort of confusion or how to reference it. And obviously, if you're still uncertain about whether you're eligible or not, you can always email or call the team before you submit just to verify. But this is here just a reference, nothing to fill out here, just for helping with submitting the workbook here. Finally, the last tab, which is the export tab, and nothing to do here. This is actually for our team only. It's used for submitting to review. So this is just here. It kind of lives buried in the back, but no input required here. Now, after you filled out the workbook and prepared your plans information as well as your supporting documents, you're going to need to upload those to your corresponding SharePoint folder, which is created during our initial call and initial onboarding. For every home you create, you want to create a subfolder so that each home's documents as well as plans that can be correctly logged to its corresponding folder. Please note if there are multiple homes, you want to create multiple folders so that each home is correctly organized. Once you've done that, you'll want to make sure to email the team at nextlevelhomes@trccompanies.com. That way the team knows your project has officially been submitted, and that'll trigger us to go in and take a look at it for official review. As a side note, I wanted to point out that if you are a larger developer or builder who has multiple homes to upload, more than just a few, please reach out to the team as we can assist with the potential bulk upload process that will make that initial uploading of documentations smoother and faster. With that, I think you take the time to watch this video and learn about our Entry Credits Plus submission program process. If you're already enrolled, we look forward to your next submission. If you're new to the program, please head over to the website and get the interest form submitted so we can get you started. Thanks for letting up. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.